This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil. Welcome back. So what I want to do today is answer a specific question that I got in email from a subscriber who's taken my courses and watches a lot of my YouTube videos. And he was asking, how do I build the habit of chart reading? He was essentially saying that, I refer a lot of times that I go through thousands and thousands of charts. And when he starts to go through them, he gets kind of bored after about 5 or 10. And, the thing is that, you got to realize I'm doing this for a living. And one of the reasons why people are willing to pay me $100 a month and forget the institutional business, because I'm doing one-on-one with a lot of those guys. But just in terms of the subscriber base, is because I'm going through thousands and thousands of charts. I think there aren't that many guys with my skill set that are willing to go through this many charts, and most of them don't have the time. You got to realize what those guys are doing. So I had the opportunity it was about 10 or 15 years ago to kind of what I would call go be a rock star, where they tout you around, you go all over the country, and you're sitting in front of big money. You're trying to bring business into this specific place that I was going to be working for. And when I thought about it more and more, I just decided not to do it. And the reason is that it would take away from my discipline of looking at lots of charts. There's just no way you can do that traveling around the country, sitting in meetings all day, and do what I'm able to do. So again, I don't think there's very many guys that can see charts as well as I can, that are willing to put in the time to go through thousands and thousands of charts. Now, I know a few guys that do, but they're just very, very few. And so I think that's why, the service that I offer, I believe, is pretty valuable. You're getting kind of insights from someone who's been doing this for 35 years. So anyway, before I go any further, I do want to make sure you understand how I would go about and why I go about going through a big list of stocks. So my belief, and I've had this belief for a pretty long time, is that if I go through 2,000 or 3,000 charts, I'm going to find a handful that no one else is going to see. I kind of view them as kind of like little needles in a haystack that you can't really screen for. You're just not going to find them. All right. And so we can identify those. I like to go through big lists and sort them by sector. Now, I also go through specific sector charts. So I'm telling you all this because I want you to understand it. When I started out, what I would do is I would literally go through a smaller list. All right. And I actually used a hand chart, so it's a little bit different. When I got into technical analysis, I kind of hit the ground running, and I was doing hand charting of point and figure charts, and I was doing a couple hundred charts at the end of the day every day. But if I were to start out today, and I know this, and I have a pretty good feel for my technique, my approach to the market, I think what I would do, and let's go ahead and get into this because I want to explain the approach that I would use. Now, before I do, I just want to make sure you understand, if you don't know some of these techniques, you want to learn more about using MACD and ADX in multiple timeframes, I would suggest starting with the book. And then the course would be the next step. And then what I see, the guys who have used my services the best, I think they've started out with the book, then they get the courses, and then they go and they take my service, and they realize the power of me going through all the charts for them. They just don't have it, especially if you have a full-time job. It's very hard to do the type of work that I'm doing as well. Now, if you would like this content, please hit the like button and also subscribe. Okay, so I've got TC2000 up. Now, you can do this in pretty much any program, although I will admit that I have had some problems with stock charts. I'm the only one who is able to be kind of blocked out of that. That's happened to me 2 or 3 times where if I go through, I have like 4 or 5 charts up at once that are pulling up every time I hit a symbol. And I go through charts very quickly, and they'll lock me out because I'm taking in too much data with all the indicators and everything. So I have to call them to have them do it. So I'm the only person in the history of stock charts that's ever happened to. So I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think you're going to get to that level where you're powering through the list that quickly. But most places are going to give you the ability to pull up a list and then go through a series of charts So if I click on one, all 4 charts change on the right. Now, what I would suggest to do if I were you and you're having trouble looking at a lot of charts, the goal is to build a habit. All right. Building a habit means that you want to start small and then build from there. Okay. And the way you go about doing that is starting with the Dow Jones Industrial Average stocks. There's 30 stocks. If you can't get yourself to browse through the Dow Jones list 3 or 4 times a week, then either you've got to make a decision. You're either not going to be looking for longer term plays. That's one thing, or you're going to have to take a service like mine. All right, that's going to narrow it down for you. All right, and give you a much easier way to identify the stocks you want to trade. Now, the person that asked this question is actually looking at foreign stocks, and it's not like that. My service doesn't do that. It's just U.S. stock oriented. So they have to figure out a way to get themselves start with a list. Okay, I sort that list by sector, and then you're going to go through that list, and I would suggest doing it every Monday through Friday, every day. Okay, that would be the starting point. You do that for about a month with just the Dow Jones. Now, the foreign guy who's whatever his country's major index, you take that. There should be a concentrated index that has 30 to 50 stocks or whatever. Sort it by sector and get yourself to go through that. All right, it will make a huge difference for you in terms of seeing what the market's doing and everything. You'll become more of a bottom up thinker. All right, and that means you're going to be more focused on the individual stocks that make up the market rather than just looking at the indexes. All right. If you do that, then you can build this muscle up and you can get a little bit better. And then you can go and say, okay, I'm going to switch this and I'm going to start looking at the Dow Jones plus the NASDAQ 100. All right. So now I've got those 2 lists. I can add those symbols together. And now I'm probably at around 115 because there are some in the NASDAQ 100 that are also in the Dow. So call it 110. Maybe there's an extra 15 or something like that. There might be 10 that are overlapping. So say you're looking at 115 charts. Again, sort them by sector. Go through those on a consistent basis. Even if you can do that 3 times a week, it'll make a huge difference for you in terms of seeing the patterns out there. Now, again, the person who's asking about this, you've got to do this with your own indexes for your country. All right. And whatever stock exchanges you're watching, you got to be able to do that on your own. But if I'm a US guy, this is kind of the way I would do it. And then if you have the time, what you might do is take the OEX list, which is the S&P 100 and the NASDAQ 100, add them together, and it'll probably give you about 150 stocks, sort them by sector, and then on the weekend, you go through all of those with a fine-tooth comb. On the weekend is when you spend one day on the weekend and you do a review. You kind of go through and you take a hard look at everything by sector, and you get a real good feel for what's taking place. Now, what that's going to do is twofold. Number one, you're going to start seeing, it's threefold. One is you're going to start seeing themes develop. You're going to see sort of money flowing in, especially if you get better at looking at charts and seeing the price action. All right. So that's one thing, and you will get better at it. So that's part 2 is the more charts you look at, the better you are going to be at reading charts. It's just as simple as that. I've looked at a gazillion charts. I don't even know what the number is now. If you think about it, if I look at 3,000 stocks a week for the past 30 years, I don't know what that number is. So, and actually that's even a little light because I go through so many different, for my client lists, my institutional clients, I go through there specifically on top of the ones that I'm doing for the subscriber list. So it's a lot of stocks that I look at. And I just think it makes me feel, I get a real good feel for what the market's doing by looking at a lot of individual symbols. So you've got the ability to get better at chart reading. You've got the ability to see market themes, right? And then you also are able to generate ideas from that. So you should be able to narrow that list down and take it down to a smaller, more manageable list, hopefully less than 20, that you can then put alerts on and everything. I go through a lot of this in the course. I'm not going to give you every single detail, but that's the general sense of how I would go about doing that. Now, if that is too much for you, you've got another choice. Okay. But if you're going to do that route, so let me just show you your other choice. Your other choice is, okay, I'm going to day trade. I'm going to look at spiders, Qs, IWM, and then pick out another sector that might be moving, like XLF has, just recently hit a new high. If you want to have those 4 charts up and you have their 5 minute and their 1 minute, right? And you just trade signals that show up in these 4 indexes. That's it. All right. And you could probably get away with just using 1 or 2. You could just go with the spider and the QQQ. Now, I'm very reluctant to suggest using the spider by itself, simply because what I notice guys do is they end up forcing positions because they've got to sit around and wait and wait and wait for really good opportunities. And when you do that with one specific index, you're going to start forcing trades because you feel like you have to put on a trade. All right. So that's why I recommend 4. You can normally find something. I prefer and you might want to look for like GLD or something like that that's doing something a little bit different. So you could have SPY, QQQ, IWM, and GLD, right? And then you're going to look for trades in the approach. You've got to tell yourself what type of signals you're going to take. If it's the pullback trade only, are you going to do a reversion trade or whatever? And then you go and look for those taking place in those 4 indexes. All right. So that's one way to do it. If you don't really want to look at a bunch of charts, okay, but you've got to do one. I think you've got 3 choices. You can either take a service like mine that is going to do most of the work for you in terms of narrowing down the list. Now, I'm going to take the list down to 40 or 50, and then on my Wednesday video that I do for subscribers, I give a lot of detail as to which ones and help with entry points and all that stuff in terms of telling people where I would be looking, what type of trade it would be, and stuff like that. But if I'm doing it on my own, I've got to be willing to at least look at a minimum, I think, 100 stocks a day or 150 stocks on the weekend, maybe 200 on the weekend, and get a better feel for the overall market. And that's how I'm going to get pretty good at generating ideas. Now, I will say what you're going to miss in that, and one of the things I'm doing for my service is I'm starting to identify more and more small cap stocks because I look at so many. I go all the way down to 300 million market cap. I am starting to identify some small cap names that are, you're not going to see if you're just looking at a couple hundred. All right. So there's certain disadvantages to try and do it yourself unless you're willing to look at a lot of charts. And I don't know a whole lot of guys that are able to keep that pace up for very long. They could do it for a week, maybe a month, and some guys 3 months, and then it kind of dies out because it's just too much work. And unless they're doing it for a living. So you've got some choices here. I just wanted to make sure I made it clear as to how I would build this muscle up of looking at charts and getting better at chart rating. There is no better way. So the funny thing is that you either can look at thousands and thousands of charts over the course of 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, you're going to get pretty good at seeing patterns. All right. If you do this consistently, you're going to be looking at, 100 stocks a day, on the weekend, another couple hundred. You add that up, you're getting close to about 1,000 a week. Maybe it's more like 500, 600, 700. But at the end of 6 months, you're going to have looked at a lot of charts in 4 different time frames. And I think you're going to get a much better feel for what you're doing. Now, that's one way to do it. Or you can go 6 months trading intraday off of a 5 minute and a 1 minute or a 10 minute and a 2 minute, however you want to do it. And if you do it that way, you will get better at reading charts. All right. There's 2 different ways to go about it. I like both. All right. I like, if I have the time and I have an hour during the course of the day, look to put on, and I would do it in a simulator if I'm not a real day trader, like if I'm not really day trading, but I want to learn the patterns and do that do trades in a simulator on an intraday basis. And then when you're doing if you're going through your lists, go through your lists and start with a smaller list of like the Dow Jones, and then build it up to maybe a NASDAQ 100 plus the Dow Jones and get a good feel for what you're seeing there. And after 6 months, I think you're going to get a lot better at this. All right. So I hope this helps and answers the question. I think a lot of people have come to me with this sort of, hey, do you have any screens? How do you feel about, what about these screens? Yeah, I mean, you can do screens. I used to do screens. You can do that. The problem is when the market gets more difficult, you're going to find yourself forcing trades if you don't really understand what you're doing. That's why I like looking at a set list of stocks, because that set list you're going to feel better about or worse about as you go through them. If you're just doing the screens, yeah, you can probably find a single or name or two that looks pretty good, but then you don't know what's happening around that, right? You don't know if the market is deteriorating or improving. I mean, yeah, you could look at the S&P and you could look at the NASDAQ and think that you know what's really going on, but I think it's much harder to ascertain how strong the market is without going through at least some form or some list of stocks, or again, if you're taking a service like mine. I'm not really trying to do an advertisement for my reports. I'm just trying to explain that you have to have a method that is going to bring names to you, and if you're not willing to do it yourself, you probably got to find one that you trust, that can bring stocks to your attention. All right, let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you next time.